It's from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is like the main character of the Gospel of Mark, and he wants to retreat, he wants to escape. This is the kind of thing Jesus does after he's tired. He's actually modeling to us how we might work and pray. He goes up to Tyre, which is a region north of where he normally is, and he meets this Greek woman. She's from Syria and Phoenicia, and she's a foreigner for all intents and purposes. It's very different for a Jewish rabbi to speak to. And she asks him to free her daughter from a demon that's possessed her. And Jesus responds in a way that might be, this is the weird part, might be a little bit uncharacteristic for Jesus as far as we know him today. He says something like, first let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. Are you calling this woman a dog? That's offensive, right? Every single person today hearing that would definitely see some sort of prejudice. Today we might call it racism. She's from a different place, she's asking for help, and then you call her a dog. And then she responds and says, Lord. She honors him as Lord and says, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. First of all, there is cultural tension between Jews and Greeks and even Jews and people from this region. So Jesus might, we think, be having a play on words, retorting with a criticism that they've received, or really a strong insult that the Jews have received. But aside from that kind of socio-political context, she responds to him, she talks back to Jesus using his language and says, even the dogs eat the children's crumbs. In the context of the New Testament, you go to Romans or Galatians and you see, yes, Jesus came first for the Jews and then for the Greeks. And so you have a similar motif here, the children, and then we're eating the children's crumbs because you and I are Gentiles. Well, most likely anyway. But I think the power of the story is in the weirdness of the story is that Jesus seems to come to this region with an idea about the parameters of his mission and who he's here to save. And the appeal of this woman seems to change his mind about what he's doing here. What is this mystery that we live in? We don't have very clear ways to talk about God or to understand God. Sometimes we use the Aristotelian phrase, he's the unmoved mover. And so he never changes because he's changing the whole world. I also wonder if our dialogue with one another and with God can also move God's heart. And more importantly, can expand who is affected and loved and touched by God. For Jesus, it seemed to have been the children of Israel, right? Children of the Jewish people. This woman talks to him and she gets included in on the project. The New Testament is all about expanding who we see as belonging. And of course, this gives the church today the agency and the liberty in dialogue with one another and with God to talk about who else to include. We need to imagine then who are the people being left out from our local expression and from the global expression of the church. And rather than just thinking about that ourselves or letting another force write the narrative, we get to talk to God and each other about it. Just like this brave Syrophoenician woman who Jesus is said to have honored her faith, just like she did. She went and talked to Jesus and had a dialogue. So the idea we're working with is that dialogue is really going to keep us connected. We say it protects our gravity. This story is weird because it seems to show Jesus as prejudicial, but then it also shows Jesus changing his mind. So it models for us the humility that we should have too. That we should listen to each other, let go of our prejudices as we're confronted, and not be so certain. Because whether this was actually what was happening in Jesus' mind or not, he definitely had a posture of humility, of understanding, of listening, and of changing. The church today needs to keep that example going. No, we'll meet you right where you're at. And Jesus shows us that in this very bizarre account in Mark.